On the night of April 17, 1952, the sky over Soviet Ukraine was a vast, hostile emptiness. At 36,000 feet, squadron leader John Crampton gripped the yoke of his North American B-45C Tornado. His mission was daring to fly deep into the heart of a superpower and photograph its most secret military installations. The four-engine jet streaked through the near-total silence, a high-tech ghost penetrating the most heavily guarded airspace in the world. Suddenly, the silence was broken. On the ground, Soviet radar operators had caught a blip on their screens, and the sky around Crampton's jet erupted with the fiery streaks of anti-aircraft fire. Without a moment's hesitation, Crampton slammed the throttles forward, unleashing the full power of the Tornado's four jet engines. He banked the plane hard, turning back towards the safety of the West, just as Soviet night fighters were scrambled to hunt him down. But as Crampton raced for the base, a puzzling question hung in the air. He was a pilot in the Royal Air Force, yet his aircraft was a state-of-the-art American machine. The Tornado's fuselage bore the distinct roundel of the Royal Air Force. But beneath the fresh paint lay the faint outline of a United States Air Force star. The answer was buried in a secret political agreement born from the anxieties of the Cold War. This daring flight was just one chapter in the remarkable story of a pioneering aircraft. The North American B-45 Tornado was a machine of firsts, a critical bridge between the piston-engine bombers of World War II and the swept-wing giants of the jet age. It wasn't just a platform for spying on the Soviets. It also broke new ground in aerial refueling and became the first American jet capable of carrying nuclear weapons. This is its story, an aircraft that happens to have many firsts, and each one would change the future of air power. Most famously, the B-45 was the first jet bomber to enter service with the United States Air Force. While other aircraft such as the B-46, B-47, and B-48 were still in the testing phase, the B-45 officially entered service on April 22, 1948, marking the United States Air Force's transition from piston engines to jet engines for its strategic bomber force. The development of the B-45 Tornado began during the final years of World War II, originating from a critical military initiative that would eventually reshape American air power. In 1944, the United States War Department launched a crucial program aimed at developing jet-powered bombers to counter emerging Axis technologies that threatened Allied air superiority. The German Luftwaffe's Arado R-234 Blitz created immediate concern among Allied military planners. As the world's first operational jet bomber, this revolutionary aircraft flew at speeds approximately 100 miles per hour faster than American fighter planes, making it virtually impossible to intercept in pursuit. The R-234's ability to conduct high-speed reconnaissance missions with near impunity particularly troubled American military leaders who recognized the strategic advantage such capabilities provided. Although ultimately deployed too late and in insufficient numbers to alter the war's outcome, with only a few hundred produced and several dozen seeing combat, the R-234 revealed a troubling technological gap. Consequently, in October 1944, the United States Army Air Forces issued an urgent request for a new family of jet-powered bombers, marking what historians consider the first such requirement released outside of Germany. North American aviation quickly responded to this opportunity by developing its proposal designated NA-130. Following a comprehensive evaluation of submissions from multiple aircraft manufacturers, the War Department ultimately selected North American's design. On September 8, 1944, the company began construction of 3 prototypes based on the NA-130 concept. The NA-130 design demonstrated significant promise, though some aviation historians have characterized it as merely a traditional bomber onto which jet engines had been fitted. While it featured straight wings and a conventional tail, it was also a practical and achievable design. It represented the right aircraft at the right time as America sought to advance its bomber capabilities. By mid-1946, both North American's XB-45 and the competing Convair XB-46 were approaching completion. Meanwhile, Boeing's revolutionary XB-47 and Martin's XB-48 remained at least 2 years away from completion. After a thorough evaluation, military officials determined the B-45 had reached a more advanced development stage and would be less expensive to produce. Subsequently, on January 2, 1947, the contract for the production of B-45A aircraft was signed. The War Department's original specifications for the jet bomber program were ambitious and forward-thinking. They sought an aircraft with a gross weight between 80,000 and 200,000 pounds, positioning it as a light or medium bomber for that era. Moreover, the requirement stipulated that the bomber must be capable of carrying the massive 22,000-pound Grand Slam bomb originally developed by the British. Design highlights of the B-45 included shoulder-mounted straight wings with 4 engines mounted in pairs in bulky nacelles beneath the wings, a conventional empennage with pronounced dihedral for the horizontal stabilizers to clear engine exhaust turbulence, a tandem cockpit with ejection seats for the 2 pilots, and tricycle landing gear. This configuration enabled the aircraft to fulfill its intended roles while maintaining acceptable performance characteristics. Even before the XB-45's first flight, military leadership expressed confidence in the design. The United States Army Air Forces announced on August 2, 1946, that it would endorse the aircraft for production over Convair's B-46. Initially ambitious plans called for 5 light bomb groups and 3 light reconnaissance groups to be equipped with the new aircraft. After securing the production contract, North American Aviation accelerated work on America's first jet bomber. The B-45 Tornado would soon demonstrate both remarkable promise and unexpected challenges as it moved from concept to operational aircraft. Following assembly at North America's Inglewood facility, the first XB-45 prototype was transported by road in sections to Muroc Field, later renamed Edwards Air Force Base, in California's high desert, where engineers reassembled it for flight testing. On March 17, 1947, the historic maiden flight occurred with company test pilot George William Krebs at the controls and flight engineer Paul Brewer aboard. The Associated Press reported the event the next day, describing the sleek aircraft as having lines resembling a fighter more than a bomber, with exceedingly high speed. The prototype completed a 1-hour test flight, marking a pivotal moment in American aviation history. The successful first flight led to an extensive testing program, with the 3 prototype aircraft ultimately completing 131 test flights. This intensive evaluation process provided critical data for refining the aircraft before full production commenced. However, the flight test program quickly revealed serious technical issues with the B-45 Tornado. Most critically, poor engine reliability hampered operations from the beginning. The first production B-45As, delivered in April 1948, were not considered combat-ready and were assigned primarily to training duties and test programs. Technical problems extended beyond engine reliability to include gyro compass failures at high speeds, malfunctioning bomb shackles, inaccurate cockpit gauges, maintenance-intensive ANAPQ-24 bombing and navigation radar. Pressurization system failures are limiting operational altitude. Most alarmingly, on September 20, 1948, the first production B-45A1 NA Tornado serial 47001 was lost during testing near Alpha, California. During a dive test, one engine exploded, sending cowling panels into the horizontal stabilizer. Without functioning ejection seats, test pilots George Krebs and Nicholas Pickard were killed in the ensuing crash. Budget cuts also affected B-45 production. Initially, the Air Force planned an ambitious deployment for the B-45, intending to equip 5 light bomb groups and 3 light reconnaissance groups with the new jet bomber. However, by mid-1948, the United States Air Staff began questioning the B-45's value, particularly as the more advanced Boeing B-47 Stratojet's development progressed so well. The program faced its most significant setback through President Truman's budget constraints, which reduced Air Force expenditures and curtailed B-45 production from an original order of 190 aircraft to just 142 airframes. On January 7, 1949, the cancellation of 51 B-45s was publicly announced. Between February 1948 and June 1949, North American aviation delivered 96 B-45A aircraft. Only 10 of the advanced B-45C variants were completed before production shifted to the RB-45C reconnaissance version, of which 33 were built. In total, 139 operational aircraft plus 3 prototypes were produced, far fewer than originally planned. These production cuts reflected changing priorities and rapid technological advances in the post-war military landscape. Nevertheless, the B-45 Tornado represented a crucial transitional aircraft that bridged the gap between World War II bombers and the more sophisticated jet bombers that would follow. 1950 marked a significant milestone for the B-45. It became the first multi-engine jet bomber to be refueled in the air. At the same time, the outbreak of war on the Korean Peninsula also provided the opportunity for the B-45 to prove its worth. The Korean War breathed new life into the B-45 Tornado program and elevated the aircraft from its technical difficulties to a position of strategic importance. Facing the real-world pressures of combat, the bomber quickly proved its value in multiple operational roles. In Korean combat theaters, the B-45 Tornado demonstrated versatility as both a conventional bomber and a high-altitude reconnaissance platform. The reconnaissance variant, designated RB-45C, operated primarily from bases in Japan to gather critical intelligence. Initially, these aircraft conducted daylight missions until early 1952, when an RB-45 narrowly escaped destruction by a MiG-15 fighter, prompting a shift to night operations. Unfortunately, the B-45 also made unwanted history on December 4, 1950, when Soviet-piloted MiG-15s successfully intercepted and shot down an RB-45C over Chinese airspace, marking the first jet bomber downed by a jet fighter. Captain Charles McDonough was the only crew member to parachute from the aircraft, though he is believed to have died in captivity. The RB-45C variant featured 12 cameras distributed across 4 fuselage positions, an elongated nose, a framed canopy, and a bomb bay, converted to accommodate 25 M122 flash bombs. These modifications enabled the aircraft to document North Korean positions and monitor Chinese troop movements into the conflict zone. As the Korean conflict expanded, military strategists recognized the B-45's potential as a nuclear deterrent against possible Soviet aggression in Europe. Through Operation Backbreaker, sometimes called Operation Fandango, 40 B-45 bombers underwent extensive modifications. These changes included structural alterations to accommodate 3 different types of atomic weapons, the installation of new defensive systems, and additional fuel tankage. The modification process proved challenging. Initially, the B-45 had not been designed with nuclear delivery in mind. And because of extreme secrecy surrounding the nuclear program, North American engineers were unaware of early atomic weapons dimensions. A large structural spar extending across the bomb bay further complicated matters, requiring expensive and time-consuming modifications. From 1950 to 1958, B-45s of the 47th Bomb Wing Light, stationed at Royal Air Force, Sculthorpe, England, formed a key component of America's nuclear deterrent against potential Soviet ground attacks in Europe. These nuclear-capable aircraft began arriving in the United Kingdom in May 1952, with all 40 modified bombers deployed by mid-June. Several factors made the B-45 effective as a strategic deterrent. First, its jet propulsion provided speed advantages over earlier bombers. Second, it became the first multi-engine jet bomber to be refueled in mid-air, extending its operational range. Third, technological advances had reduced the size and weight of nuclear weapons, allowing smaller aircraft like the B-45 to serve in roles previously limited to heavy bombers. Ultimately, the B-45 Tornado served in the Strategic Air Command from 1950 until 1959, when it was phased out as the more advanced Boeing B-47 Stratojet entered widespread service. During its short but crucial service, the B-45 had not only become the first multi-engine jet bomber to be refueled in the air, but also America's first jet capable of carrying and dropping a nuclear bomb. To fully appreciate these accomplishments, it's helpful to look closer at the specific B-45 variants that made them possible. The B-45A served as the baseline production model, featuring improved ejection seats, communications equipment, an E-4 automatic pilot, and bombing navigation radar, compared to the prototype XB-45. Early B-45As suffered from numerous technical issues, including gyro compass failures at high speeds, malfunctioning bomb shackles, and inaccurate cockpit gauges. The B-45C represented a significant advancement as it carried two 200-gallon wingtip fuel tanks, featured a strengthened canopy, and incorporated an in-flight refueling receptacle. Only 10 B-45C aircraft were completed before production shifted to the reconnaissance variant. The RB-45C reconnaissance platform featured substantial modifications, with its bombardier's canopy faired over and replaced by an oblique camera system. This variant could carry either two 214-gallon external fuel tanks or two JATO rockets for assisted takeoffs. Most impressively, the RB-45C accommodated up to 12 cameras across 4 positions, or a single camera with a 100-inch focal length lens. The B-45C marked a historic aviation milestone as the first multi-engine jet bomber in the world to be refueled in mid-air. This breakthrough capability dramatically extended the aircraft's operational range and strategic value. In 1950, a Strategic Air Command RB-45C completed aerial refueling with a Boeing KB-29B tanker, establishing a precedent for future bomber operations. On July 29, 1952, an RB-45C, commanded by Major Lewis Carrington, achieved another remarkable first, completing the inaugural non-stop trans-Pacific flight from Alaska to Japan. This is a 3,640-mile journey made possible by 2 KB-29 aerial refuelings, which earned Major Carrington and his crew the prestigious Mackay Trophy for 1952. Finally, to conclude today's video, let's talk about the mission mentioned at the beginning of the video. The mission marked the first American jet reconnaissance aircraft to fly over Soviet airspace. Because it was difficult to get Washington to approve American crews to fly over the European Soviet Union, the Strategic Air Command sought aid from the British government. The command urgently required radar scope photographs of probable targets in the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. General Nathan Twining, Air Force Chief of Staff, and General LeMay, then head of the Strategic Air Command, requested the Royal Air Force to conduct the first deep penetration flights over the Soviet Union. The Royal Air Force may have been conducting shallow penetration flights over Soviet territory since at least late 1948. However, publicly available evidence is scant. British pilots reportedly overflew parts of the southern Soviet Union in the wooden twin-engine Mosquito PR from airfields in Iraq, Crete, and maybe elsewhere. In April 1951, 3 Royal Air Force air crews were dispatched to the United States to train on the RB-45, returning to Sculthorpe later that year with 4 United States Air Force RB-45C Tornadoes. With Royal Air Force markings on the planes, British airmen prepared to undertake night penetration flights to capture radar images of probable targets for SAC and British Bomber Command. On the night of March 21, 1952, the planes carried out a trial flight over East Germany. The Royal Air Force duly obliged by forming the suitably anodyne Special Duties Flight, led by Squadron Leader John Crampton. The Soviet Union's first RB-45C overflights took place on the night of April 17-18th, with 3 aircraft targeting Soviet long-range bomber sites and air defenses. The jets took off from Sculthorpe and were refueled over Denmark and West Germany by United States Air Force KB-29 tankers. The RB-45C spy planes then flew east, breaching Soviet airspace at 3 separate sites. They flew 3 distinct routes: the northern one over the Baltic states, the second as far east as Moscow, and the third southeast over Ukraine. The missions lasted up to 10.5 hours, with the planes overflying. While over Soviet territory, they were spotted by radar, and fighter interceptions were attempted, but unsuccessfully. On their return flights, KB-29s refueled them again. The final case for the expedition was presented in a summary document in February 1952 and approved by Prime Minister Churchill. In March, a modest test of German defenses over the Soviet zone for about 30 minutes elicited no Russian reply, and the flight was ready for operation. The flight's results were deemed a great success, and the Special Duties Flight was disbanded only to be briefly resurrected in the fall of 1952. This reactivation was short-lived because not all of the cabinet subcommittee ministers engaged were satisfied with the flights. Anthony Eden, the Foreign Secretary, strongly opposed this second flight because he saw it as more important to the United States of America than to the United Kingdom. The information to be obtained by Ju-jitsu 2 is required primarily for the general atomic offensive on the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, and not for the special attacks on Soviet bomber bases, which are so important for the defense of the United Kingdom. He questioned why the United Kingdom would take on such high-risk trips when the United States was unwilling to do so. Ministerial colleagues accepted Eden's objections, and the United States authorities were notified of their decision, with the proposals quietly withdrawn. In stark contrast to U-2 missions several years later, the Royal Air Force aircrew were given a cover story that they had been lost and were carrying bags of forged navigation plans and maps. All three planes made it safely back to base, and their overflights provided SAC and Royal Air Force Bomber Command planners with crucial target intelligence. General LeMay personally complimented the lead Royal Air Force crew. Cargill Hall, an intelligence historian, summarized the flights. In approving the mission, Prime Minister Winston Churchill took a breathtaking political risk. If any of the RB-45Cs had been brought down, the resulting outcry probably would have led to Churchill's unseating as Prime Minister. But balanced against this was the need of Western intelligence to acquire radar scope photographs of specific military installations. The RB-45C's daring missions not only provided NATO with its first strategic intelligence, but also proved the value of airborne reconnaissance, paving the way for later legends such as the U-2 and SR-71 Blackbird. The B-45 Tornado's operational life, while innovative, was short. It served in the Korean War, where the reconnaissance version, the RB-45C, proved invaluable, but also suffered an unfortunate history on December 4, 1950. An RB-45C became the first jet bomber in history to be shot down by a jet fighter, a Soviet-piloted MiG-15. Ultimately, the advent of the superior swept-wing Boeing B-47 Stratojet quickly rendered the B-45 obsolete. By the late 1950s, most of them had been retired. The B-45 may not have been the best bomber, but it was certainly the greatest teacher. It taught the United States Air Force invaluable lessons in jet engine operation and maintenance, high-speed tactics, and covert reconnaissance. It was a vital bridge filling a strategic void during one of the most dangerous periods in its history. Today, only 3 B-45 Tornadoes remain proudly displayed in museums in California, Ohio, and Nebraska. The B-45C at the National Museum of the United States Air Force was saved from the scrapyard only by a stroke of luck. It was on loan to Pratt & Whitney for testing at a time when other aircraft were being retired. As a result, the legacy of this pioneering hero, a machine that quietly shaped the face of modern air warfare, lives on to this day.